Hello, welcome back to the OMG MotoGP podcast. I know we've been away for a little while and we've been quite quiet. We are still trying to be back for this season. There are a few little things in the works, so all is not yet lost, but we thought we'd just jump on because obviously it's the first race this weekend. We just had testing and it would be rude not to. So I've gathered the troops that I can in the form of Amy Reynolds and of course Keith Huewen, and I'm Harry Benjamin if you're new round here. And there's been a lot going on since we last spoke. I mean, Keith, let's start with you. What's catching your eye as we gear up for the first race of another long MotoGP season?
Oh, I love this time of the year, Harry, Amy. Good to see you both. It is that time of the year. Everyone looks at testing and says, oh, Yamaha have made a big step. Honda have made a step. This one's made a step. You know, Jorge Martin is obviously injured, which is the worst thing that you could start your defence of a title with. Where do you start? I always take a really relaxed view to testing because I don't think you ever get a true picture with testing. The conditions at Sepang could be so-and-so. The conditions at the Buriram test could be just a little bit off the mark. It's. I think what's surprising is I've been impressed with the likes of Ogura. I think he's gone very well on the Honda. That's impressed me. The fact that Ducati seems to have stayed still with regard to their development for this year. KTM are in all sorts of financial trouble, and that is definitely going to have an effect. Whatever anybody tells you, it's going to have an effect on their development as well as things move on. Aprilia obviously have lost their top man with injury. Where do you want to go on? Bagnaia and Marquez are the two that most people are focused on. And then we had that appalling launch in Bangkok that really was, when you compare it with the 75th anniversary of Formula One, was an absolute cluster. What's it? I mean, I have to say that
different tax brackets, I think.
We had a Thai version of JT, James Toseland there, only he wasn't as professional as JT. Obviously, he got his notepad trying to work out who was coming up on stage next. Honestly, I have no idea how we can muck things up as badly as that. I really don't. It was a massive event. The Thais are massive enthusiasts. It was a big city centre event. And somehow we've got lots of people waving arms trying to direct people on road-going motorbikes that have been painted like Grand Prix bikes. It just was appalling. It was our Drive to Survive cock-up that we had before. We've just had the same launch. And then you lot, your multi-million pound launch in the O2 in London, was fantastic,
pretty damn good,
I have to say, for a live event. I didn't quite see you, even though you stand head and shoulders above everyone else, but I know you were there on your freebies.
I was there working hard, thank you very much. I was flying the flag for good old BBC Radio. I mean, Keith doesn't mince his words, does he, Amy? It's been a turbulent off-season, to say the least. But I suppose the biggest story on a rider front is that switch for Marc Marquez going up now alongside Bagnaia. How do you think that's going to pan out? I mean, if we're looking at testing only, which I know is a big caveat, it's swinging towards Marquez already. Bagnaia didn't have the best of pre-season tests.
Well, do you know what? It's funny, Harry. I very much agree with Keith. When it comes to testing, you can't read too much into it. However, I think the one thing you can take away is the fact that Ducati are still in front. They are going to be dominant again this season. And obviously the tantalising prospect of Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia going up against each other is just basically a wait and see situation. I had my annual catch up with Matt Burt and Matt Dunn. So Matt Burt's obviously MotoGP's commentator, and we've had Matt Dunn on the podcast as a guest beforehand. And it was interesting to hear their takes on how it's all going to play out. And one of the things they actually flagged to me, and I'll put my hands up in the air, I only just started watching it. It's the documentary that Dorna produced and put up over the winter. And they were talking about a little exchange between Marc and Pecco when they both got, I think they had a little, I can't remember what race it was after now. But essentially, the seeds are sown. All is not going to be plain sailing in that box, let me just tell you. And I think the thing that has taken me by surprise is I have obviously not been in the paddock for a couple of years. And Pecco has always been quite stoic in his approach to things. When he's ever had an issue of any kind, he's always been someone that is not quick to throw insults or anything like that. But what actually did take me by surprise is that he is by no means intimidated by Marc Marquez, which I think still there are a lot of riders in that paddock that are. And I think that is where we're going to see the fireworks.
I think Pecco's cooked.
Oh, do you? No.
Oh, sure. Well, this is the moment. If ever MotoGP needs to get on with their, F1 Drive to Survive, this is the year, because these two personalities need to come out, because it is going to be a tete-a-tete.
The only thing I will say, going back to that documentary, is, again, when we say ideas, brilliant, execution, not so well, is that I'm sure they had like an AI. I was looking at my phone trying to figure out if I had a weird setting, because there was like almost like an AI American generated voice narrating it. And I was like, it just doesn't, it's not good.
Why don't they just spend the bloody money and the production staff and do it properly? At the end of the day, I mean, some of the Formula One stuff, I know Formula One is massive money and they've got loads of money to waste, it would appear, but they're wasting it in a very productive way, I've got to say, because that launch, way over the top, and half them teams, you only got to look at them. They got faces like slapped asses sat round those tables around the main stage. They didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
You could tell they didn't want to be there, but they were forced to go there. They had to go there. My favourite moment was when Christian Horner went up on. I mean, that man has got some big balls. That boy. He went up there. Either that, or he's as arrogant as hell and can't read the room, because he went up there on his own, stood up there, and I don't know whether he was expecting some accolades of some kind, but all he got was massive boos. And to be honest, it looked like he was in a bite. He did a little bit, but there you go. But we love that. I mean, he's a villain. I mean, he's behind you, Christian. It's fantastic. Let's have more pantomime.
It comes back to the whole thing that we bang the drum so much about last year, isn't it? Is that there are these personalities within the MotoGP paddock. They just need to be enabled to come out so that we can see them, and that's going to just draw more fans in.
You're going to see them this year. We've got rookies that can interfere with things. I mean, I mentioned the rather flippant one line of Pecco's cooked. I think he is. If there's no injury, if nobody gets injured, and that's with MotoGP, that is the key thing here. Look at Jorge Martin. His season has already started with damage. But Marquez is such a weapon, mentally, physically, and obviously professionally. Pecco may be stoic. He may be prepared for the fight. But you've only got to look at the Dovizioso situation in the past, and anybody that's been around that's challenged Marc Marquez. You don't get any bigger than Valentino Rossi, and Marc Marquez saw him off, not just on the track, but saw him off mentally.
Yeah, but I don't think Pecco is stoic anymore. That's the thing I'm seeing. I think there is a change. Like, I think he is going to react to it a little bit more, and I think that's what's going to make it exciting for us. I think he already did start last year.
And Marc knows it.
Yeah.
Mark already knows he's got him by the throat. He is being so nice about him. I mean, there was the animal and the gentleman comments, wasn't there, between the two of them? Pecco said, "I'm always going to be the gentleman," and Mark was quite happy to be labelled the animal. So I can't wait to see how that pans out.
It's going to set us up for an absolute ding dong all year long. Hopefully.
I can't wait.
The other thing I wanted to bring back, which is obviously a story that's been rumbling on since the end of last year, and we talk about riders. You want to come in feeling fit for the year, feeling positive and confident. But how are you feeling if you're Brad Binder, Pedro Acosta, Maverick Vinales, and Air Bastianini, and there is so much of a question mark over what is going on with the financial backing and the funding of KTM and the parent group?
All you can do is your job. That's all you can do. I mean, it's a situation that, let's talk Honda riders. All you can do is ride what you've got as best you can ride it and turn out on top of your group in that situation. Everyone will be looking in the paddock, which is the first place you've got to impress anybody is in the paddock. It matters the other side of the fence, of course it does, but not as much as it matters in the paddock. They know whether you are doing a better job than your teammates, your manufacturer mates. And so that will be the key for everyone in KTM. It's a financial mess at the moment. It's been we broke it, I think, here on OMG, or at least we were the first broadcaster to put it out there that there were problems at KTM regarding the financial side of things. And since then, it's compounded much worse. But It will be down to monitoring their own performances within their own group as it is at the moment. Will KTM challenge this year? I think Amy's already alluded to it. Ducati are looking strong, even though Ducati appear to be going with their 24 sort of setup at the moment, not the 25 bikes, which is interesting alone. So they've either made a slight mess of their development over the winter, or it just isn't quite the step that they want to make. So they've stuck with the data that they've got for the 24 bikes moving forwards.
Or just throwing something out there, Keith. Do you think it was perhaps a considered decision in terms of the regulation changes that are going to come up? Money. I mean, it's not just KTM that are facing financial difficulties. I think the whole world is. So would there be a bit of a strategic decision of like, we've got a fast bike, we've got a proven bike. Is there much to gain with where the other manufacturers are at the moment?
I think you're bang on, Amy. I think you've read the situation absolutely spot on. They've looked across at what's going on in the other garages, and they don't have to spend the money because everyone else is already in difficulties regarding development and cash.
And
so
then
I think they've
catch-up
looked
mode.
across and made that strategic decision. I think you're spot on.
I do just want to slightly pivot and apologise. I've just realised in my background is absolutely awful because you can see deodorant, you can see my wash bag. I'm in between places at the moment. So
is that your grab bag? Is that your grab bag for when you fly off for your next event?
Yeah, it actually is. Yes.
Do you know what? As bizarre as this sounds, I was looking just now and I was trying to focus in on it on my machine. I thought, I wonder what deodorant he uses.
I chop and change whatever I see. That one's Nivea. It's not an ad. Nivea for men.
Nivea, is that your mum's?
I didn't even know they did deodorant. Anyway, I'll just sort of do that, shall I? Sorry, you were having a really good debate, and then I just clocked, and I was like, "Oh, that's so unprofessional." Anyway, I'm currently living in the loft of my
side, aren't you, Harry?
I'm currently living in the loft of my brother's house while I have some renovation work done on my place. So that's my reasoning. Anyway, we'll move on. Do you think it's going to be competitive all throughout the field this year? You mentioned, Keith, like, have Yamaha made this step forward? Are we going to see Honda bouncing back? Ducati, of course, it's no longer the Ducati Cup because they've lost a couple of satellite teams now who've made the switch. So are we going to get a little bit more dicing throughout the field? I mean, MotoGP is always like that, but in terms of manufacturers fighting for wins, for podiums.
I think that what's happened with the Ducati, Amy's business mind has worked really well regarding, they've looked at it strategically. Losing a couple of factory bikes is a good thing financially. And they've got enough data with the 24 bikes to go forward with six machines. So I think strategically, as Amy has said, that Ducati are playing a bit of a blinder here at the moment. And everyone else has got to do the catch-up thing. It's Yamaha's hasn't made the step to answer that. You know, at one point they were 8/10 faster than they were last year at the Sepang test. I'm sorry to dismiss it, but we've really got to wait until we see what happens when we get to Buriram, when the flag drops properly. Excuse me. And that's when we see whether there's a massive difference. What happened to the V4? The V4 is something that's still on the back burner somewhere at Yamaha. It doesn't seem to be something that they seem to be in a hurry to get out there. That's obviously going to be a 26, 27 motor. If indeed, I mean, Jack Miller's turned around and said, what's it all about? I'm not convinced that the V4 is the way forward. You know, the inline 4 that they're running at the moment has, you know, potential still as being a motorbike that will work during the course of the year if they can find the right step in the way that the thing performs. So I think Yamaha seem to have made the biggest step in testing. But like I say, again, with that caveat that was testing, Buriram is racing, and we're going there.
Amy, what about the likes of Honda, though, Amy? I mean, deepest, darkest trouble over the last year or so. They really need a bounce back.
They absolutely do. And the thing for me with Honda is, I think, how much do you read into Joan Mir? Joan Mir went out at both tests and I think you could say posted some exciting times and something that would make you go, oh, great, okay, Honda look as though they're back. But how many times have we said that in the past? Honda are back. And then the season has started and it has become apparent exceptionally quickly that they're not. They've maybe made a step, but not enough of a step to catch up and actually play a part in the battles. So I'm holding a little bit of reservation about getting too excited about Joan Mir's times, although on paper it does look as though they have made a bit of progress.
I worry so much about the cash situation in MotoGP at the moment. Liberty have been stalled until the middle of the year or whatever it is. The Liberty takeover of Dorna and takeover of MotoGP hasn't happened. It's had to go back to the European Union regulators for clearance, and it's still not cleared yet. So they're on their second phase of that. So that's not happened. We've got a touch of Alpine that have come in to join us on the Pramac bikes this year. So a bit of Formula One has snuck into the Pramac team. So they're doing their job at Pramac as usual. Great team. So you can see how they're sort of diversifying very slightly and getting a bit of an attachment with the Alpine Formula One team. But then you've got Trackhouse. Trackhouse, for me, is an interesting phenomenon in that they've just picked up massive Red Bull money for their NASCAR team, but there ain't none coming to the MotoGP team. And that worries me that they're not able, even with their foot so firmly in the door, with the big bucks that are coming to the bloody ovals of NASCAR, but it isn't seemingly filtering across into their MotoGP team. I think we're kind of doing all right money-wise, but nowhere near like where it should be.
I don't know if I might have made this up, but have I read somewhere that Pitbull, as in rapper Pitbull, has pulled out?
Yeah, I was literally about to say the exact same thing.
Like, how relevant that is to their cash flow situation, I don't know.
I'm not sure. He's just performed in London, I think. At the O2, doing a world tour at the moment. But Pitbull, I think, was part of it.
Why didn't they get Pitbull to do the MotoGP season launch?
That would have actually been epic. That's the guy you get, but they probably want to pay him.
I tell you what, they need to pay some better hosts next year, that's for sure. You cannot have one of your main hosts going, did I pronounce your name right, to every single team manager? Like, every time he said it, I was like, just stop. Like, if reading off the clipboard for absolutely everything wasn't bad enough, it was asking every single team manager whether he pronounced their names right.
Should have been you and Keith. Job done.
I'll tell you what. While we're on the subject of NASCAR, I remember when I got that. I've mentioned this before on OMG MotoGP that I got the NASCAR job at Sky when I was working for Sky to present it, and I was on a beach in Thailand, as I will be in a week's time. Mm-hmm. And basically, I get a call from Sky. Will you present the NASCAR? In fact, that isn't a question. That is a command. You will present the NASCAR. And the first show that I did, I called Clint Bowyer, because that's how it's spelled. And Bill Elliott, I called him Billy Elliott, the 10-year-old tap dancer, rather than the awesome Bill from Dawsonville, as he's known. And I got more shit than I've ever had in my entire life.
Oh, I'm not saying that I am perfect by any means. I'm sure I've made some real ups over the years with pronunciation. In fact, I know I have. But
no, when MotoGP want to make a splash at the beginning of the year, you can't be doing that.
Get someone that knows the job.
Like that.
Play it safe.
Well, TNT are back for 3 years. The TNT deal has been done now for 3 years.
Yeah, just
so they're. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that is. We've got a slightly new shape at IRTA, the International Race Teams Association. Jack Gorst, who's my old mechanic's bloody son.
And yeah. Guest on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jack Gorst is in IRTA now. He's in the International Race Teams Association. That'll be interesting to see how Jack gets on with them. Good bunch of people since obviously, well, not since the demise of Mike Trimby, because of Mike Trimby. IRTA is what it is, and good to see them promoting young up and comers like young Jack. So he's in there. So quite a lot going on in the background, I think. The TNT coverage is going to be interesting to see what the dogfight is going to be there as well, with who's presenting what and who's commentating on what, because I've noticed that a bit like BT did in the first instant when they first got it, 10 years ago now, they started to swap commentators around and swap partnerships, which at the time felt odd to me. Julian suddenly working with someone else, me suddenly working with someone else. But then it kind of worked out quite well and everybody got to quite like it. Well, we're seeing that with TNT across the Eurosport Discovery platforms now, that Steve Day comes in and does a bit of commentary. Somebody else comes in and does a bit of presentation. Suddenly got Rachel Stringer in there as well. So you've got this mix and mash. So it'll be interesting to see how TNT develop during the course of the year for the coverage as well, and whether they actually give us a bit more than the stock standards. I'm stood in the paddock in front of the trucks talking just boring, bloody, ordinary stuff. Oh, and by the way, we'll just grab this one. And all the way, there doesn't seem to have been any development in 10 years from a production point of view. And that's a shame. And it's down to money at the end of the day, how much money they've got to spend on the production. There's none of the big features that you used to get from people's houses. And why are we not, dining with, I don't know, Valentino Rossi at home now that he's more available than he used to be? Why are we not having these massive, great features, which we should have, which we deserve?
Unfortunately, budgets are getting less and less. This is across the board. Budgets are getting less and less while subscription prices go up and up. And
which is why we need
the
liberty.
Correlation? Exactly. But this is the thing, fans watching at home, I'm paying my subscriptions. I want in-depth coverage if I'm paying for it, and so there is an expectation now to have to deliver on that front. So it is going to be an interesting off-track watch that as well to see how that develops. Just to bring it. Oh, sorry, Amy. Go on.
Sorry, I think the other thing to take into consideration on that point, though, Keith, is the timetable and the schedules change so much in terms of they've got to get in on Saturday, they've got to get in qualifying, they've got to get Moto2, Moto3 qualifying, the sprint's got to go in. That time that you used to have to play with really cool features and things like that, plus the actual physical time, as you and we all know, when you're at the track, there's not a lot of hanging around. It is bish, bash, bosh. So the time to play with to make those really cool features, I think it's just the day and age that we live in is that there's not enough room for that stuff anymore, which is a shame because it was always the really nice intros, the things that were a little bit arty, like you said, taking the riders off track and in a different kind of environment where you can see their personalities a little bit more. I think it's just getting harder and harder to do from so many aspects.
And that's where Liberty will sort it out, because at the end of the day, if there isn't the time for that kind of stuff, your biggest audience isn't at the track. Your biggest audience is around the world watching in. It depends on where you're aiming for. I watched the World Superbikes over the weekend, and they didn't really have any presentation on site in Phillip Island in obviously the south of Australia. It is a bit difficult to get everybody down there, but their features and their bits and pieces and their rider interviews and all the rest of it are really dead interesting, and they made that effort there. I think if there isn't the time, they can make the time. From a broadcast perspective, you've got a fair old bit of time between races in MotoGP, and before and after. Obviously, there's a roundup after the races that could be a promo before. There are areas that have stayed the same. And what I'm saying, I suppose, is we don't seem to have made that step televisually that we could have made, and we're dealing with the production. I go back to our launch in Bangkok the other day. I mean, it doesn't seem to be the kind of enthusiasm for spending money and getting it right. It's just cobbled together production. It's just same old, running order, cut and paste. That'll do for next week. Cut and paste. That'll do for the next week. And I just think that we deserve better than that. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I hope that when I look at this lot back next week, when we've watched the show, they've come up with a massive step, and I'll have to eat my words and get back under my rock. And I'll tell you what, no one will be happier if that's the case. Speak as you find is pretty much my mantra, particularly now I've had the leash taken away from me of the broadcasting clampdown that you would always get from compliance at the end of every weekend. We all shiver from the compliance people.
No compliance here for Keith Huewen. Well, let's see what they come up with. I just want to pick up on something you said. You mentioned Pramac Yamaha a short while ago, and I wanted to talk about Jack Miller. Obviously, he's made the switch, and it was a rough year for him last season. At one point, it looked like he might not even have a ride to go forward. Do you think this change will give him a new lease of life?
He's at home in Pramac. They know him, they like him, he likes them, and that is half the game when you're at this kind of level. It's feeling like, but of course they're developing, Yamahas in an independent team. That is a tough job. Will Jack rise to it? Well, we're going to bloody find out, aren't we? I mean, he sounds like he's up for it. We'll soon find out. I mean, he's got to beat his teammate. It's going to be as simple as that. He has got to be in the hunt with the Yamahas. He was lucky to get work this year, to be frank. Nobody thought that Jack was going to continue. It would look like he might have to move to World Supers or somewhere like that. But he got a job with a good team, with a bunch that know him really well, that he's happy and calm with. So let's see. Fingers crossed, because the paddock without Jack Miller would not be a great place.
No, he's got one of the good personalities, and he'll be teamed up with Miguel Oliveira. And Amy, Miguel Oliveira seems over the last few years he's really sort of floated about and never really been able to dig his heels in anywhere. And he's so fast, he's so competitive, but he just always never has that little bit of extra luck. It seems that he needs to mount a charge for the full year.
But are we saying that his start to the season is down to luck? Am I missing? He's not had a crash or anything, has he?
No, I'm just in general.
I don't know. I think I've never been a big flag bearer for Miguel Oliveira. I have to be completely honest, the Portuguese fans are going to come down hard on me now. But I've never really, he's never blown me away. I don't know what it is. Okay. I've never really been thinking, he's going to be there or whatever. And when he's had a good race, I'm perfectly happy to doff my cap to him and go fair play. But he's just not a rider for me personally that I think you are going to be the next world champion, if I'm completely honest. Just touching back on Jack Miller as well, I was reading that he's gone back to a cable throttle. How much, Keith, do you think that makes a difference for a rider like Jack Miller, who you just know he's always one of those guys that he's never been shy of when conditions are sketchy. He's quite happy when he's got something a little bit loose underneath him. So having that kind of feel back in his hand again, Keith, how much do you think that actually that could be?
It's a confidence game at the end of the day. And cable throttle, it's old school, fly-by-wire nowadays is where everything's headed, obviously. But I think, good old cable throttle, it makes him feel comfy, and that's where he's at the minute. Whether there's been any kind of bugs in the system that he's ridden with, and he's insisted to go back to a cable throttle because of that, we don't know behind the scenes. And we have had, massive crashes through fly-by-wires and was it Casey Stoner that crashed years ago and hurt himself badly in an endurance thing? I think something. I might have it completely wrong somewhere, but there are situations where some riders are not that keen. So he's gone back for confidence. And you mentioned Miguel Oliveira, a perfect teammate for Jack Miller to get the better of, in a team. It's about, if you're in a team, some riders and some team managers and some people just turn around and say, no, it's not, beating your teammate. That's that old adage that we all go on about. But it is a fact. You look across the garage, if the guy on the other side of the garage is going better than you are, putting in better times than you are, he's the first guy you got to beat on equal machinery with an equal team around you. And if you're not riding, if you're not getting the best out of that package and he's doing better than you, you're the one that's going to get the tin tack at the end of the year. It's you're not going to have any sympathy. And also the fastest guy, everybody's efforts gravitate towards the fastest guy as well. So it's a double-edged sword. If you're not performing, you're going to get double the aggravation, particularly in an independent team where resources are finite or not finite, I should say. And you want the resources, you want the data engineer, the best guy looking at your stuff. So the fast guy always gets that.
The guy that makes me feel a bit worried at the moment, just looking at his pre-season, is Bastianini.
Again. I feel like we've said this before.
Yeah, but at least, I don't know. I'm not sure whether that move was I think one.
Again, but he's the kind of guy that can come up with a surprise now and again. And fingers crossed he does, because again, he's one of those, the beast. He's the kind of guy that we want in the paddock again. Yeah, you can look down the list, can't you? Somkiat Chantra, this weekend is the first time we've had a tie in MotoGP. He's under a load of pressure on a Honda. Somkiat, this is going to be performance or crash, 100%. In fact, 110% performance.
But is that all right for a rookie?
And also he's on the Honda.
Yeah.
I think you can make excuses for Chandra, a rookie, and he's on the Honda. But Bastianini, he was 15th in Thailand 18th in Sepang, that isn't just dropping down just outside of the top 10. That's dropping down to the end of the order. This was a factory Ducati rider last year, someone who beat the likes of people that we will tout for the World Championship this year. Hell, I think they would have put Enea's name in the hat to potentially winning a world title or being a contender for a world title in the last few seasons. And he's absolutely nowhere.
Well,
yeah, but he's good at looking after his tyres.
To answer Amy's question, if I can just bring in Enea Bastianini, what do you have to say?
I literally was like,
brutal, absolutely brutal. But what was it last year where he was really, he was up and down kind of for most of the season and then came along. I know it was the year before, 2023 was an absolute shocker of a year for him, wasn't it? Barely started any Grand Prix and managed to get that win towards the end in Malaysia. Yeah, Malaysia. But I feel like since this is, look, you're both more veteran of two-wheeled land than I am, but I just feel like this is part and parcel of how this works. Some seasons you're coming in looking like absolute rubbish, but the nature of the racing is you're able to turn it around and it is competitive throughout the whole order, despite sometimes the machinery that you've got, because you've got to take into account injuries. You've got to take into account now that we have a sprint every single weekend. That makes the possibility of being out for a race or two down the line even more probable.
I think this is going to be a push and shove year. I don't think you're going to have that kind of, well, you can have a couple of races off during this year. I think that Bastianini, if he doesn't perform, he's going to be out of there by the end of the year, or before even. You know, it's a situation where KTM have got problems. They're not going to, if Bastianini doesn't perform, they're quite ruthless at KTM, and they're going to be double ruthless this year because they've got no money. So I think the Bastianini is on a very sticky wicket, if we use a cricket term in this particular instance. And the competition out there, Pedro Acosta, anybody on a KTM has got to perform. Anybody who underperforms at KTM this year particularly is not going to get any sympathy. You're going to be in a difficult situation, that's for sure.
Do you think Acosta is, because when he was coming into MotoGP, there was this whole sort of push and pull, and KTM really kind of locked him down in the end, right? But obviously now there's trouble brewing in the background, whether that has any effect on what his contract says or not. But surely he's going to be sniffing around for a more stable long-term future.
I'd like a bit of fly on the wall regarding his management, because his management hopefully got that contract absolutely nailed when it comes to where he moves to, how he moves, how he can move. KTM have obviously nailed him down for a multi-year contract I've got on my list here. So they've obviously got him for 2 years plus an option.
Hopefully he might have a get-out clause somewhere.
There will be a get-out clause somewhere. I'm pretty confident of that. You know, it's a two-way street with a contract. If KTM are not performing because they've got no money, I'm fairly sure that Costa will have some kind of clause in there that gets him out of there. But where else is he going to go? Again, he's got to perform this year, or he ain't got anywhere to go. You know, he's got to perform. He's got to be the top KTM performer. You know, like I said right at the beginning of this, those in the know around the paddock will be making decisions over riders, even if they're not performing as well as it might be in the headlines, who's in the top 10 or whatever it might be. They will know how they're performing on their motorcycles on a mark that might not be as good as it should be, like Honda, for instance. Anybody who performs on a Honda, you know, people will be looking in and taking that speculative view. We'll all be watching the front, of course, the Bagnaia Marquez shenanigans that we're going to have with those two, who's going to come out on top. But there's such a lot going on down in the order. You know, Fermin Aldeguer's up, Somkiat Chantra's up. You know, Ayogura, as I said earlier on, I've seen he's gone quite good on that Honda, you know, in testing. But again, it's only testing. Let's wait and see what happens there.
Who's top rookie coming into the year? Predictions. Top rookie.
I'll go Aldeguer.
Aldeguer.
I'm going to go Agura. I mean, you're right. Aldeguer should be, but I don't know. Ayogura looked good. I mean, the old Moto2 world champion. Let's see if he's. Some people stretch their legs when they get to the quick bikes. You know, some people are made for the middleweights and the smaller bikes, and then when they get to MotoGP, it's kind of like a bit of a, you know, a step too far. But Ayagura's just looked good on that bike. And, the bits and pieces I saw of footage of him, I thought, bloody hell, this could be quite good. Although, having said that, as a Moto2 rider, blimey, it took him a long time to perform. He was up and down like a yo-yo. So let's see if MotoGP suits him.
Talking about shenanigans, can we just please spend a moment talking about Massimo Rivola openly talking out against Michelin? Like, I remember the day having the Michelin press officer chase me around the paddock because one of the riders had spoken out against the tyres and was trying to essentially get me to go back and re-record the interview. And I was like, I can't control what they say. It's like what they've said is what they've said. I've got a million other interviews to do. I'm not going to go back and re-record it. But I thought there was some kind of rule about them talking out about the tyres. Is that not the case anymore? Or has Rivola just gone?
You're not allowed to bring the sport or their sponsors into disrepute. That is a fact that is an unwritten rule, really, as much as a written one, I think. But Rivola has every right.
Piero Taramasso, you're not telling the truth.
Well, it's a situation where they have the data, and it is, Michelin have data, obviously, about the tyre, whatever the problem was. This is alluding, if anybody's not quite catching on to what we're talking about, is the Jorge Martin crash was basically blamed by Rivola and Aprilia down to a situation that Michelin. It's an old thing, isn't it? I mean, again, not much has changed over the years when it comes to shipping tyres, although I'm sure that they do it a little bit more temperature controlled compared with where it was. But when you've got a shipping container full of tyres, it's supposed to be temperature controlled, atmosphere controlled, so that the compounds and the like aren't affected by how it's shipped and where it's shipped and how long the thing's been in store. But we all know that if you've got a tyre that's perhaps been to the back of the container and in the sunlight, or if it's been somewhere else where it is actually in the container, there are all sorts of things that can affect a tyre's performance. And you do get sometimes a duff tyre. Michelin, I don't know what the science is, how they can actually hold forensically an inquest into a tyre and why it may or may not have done whatever it did. But obviously Jorge Martin has reported back to Rivola. Rivola has looked at the data and the circumstances around that tyre and has come out bloody fighting. And I say good on him, because I hate all that closed door stuff where they, if someone's at fault, if something is at fault, get stuck in. Let's hear what's going on. And let's start that bit of controversy. And if Michelin have made some kind of mistake, or if that tyre was below par, hold your hands up. They won't. But I quite like the fact that Rivola has got the balls to come straight out and take it on.
He must have been absolutely fuming. His top rider doesn't even finish testing.
Well, I'll tell you, let's go there. The man with the number one plate for the year, Jorge Martin. What can we expect from this season with him now making the switch to Aprilia?
How much were we expecting to take away the crash? Do you know what I mean? I think that's the starting point, is he's moved on to Aprilia. Did we think he was going to come out of the blocks and be winning races or sprint races right from the off?
I think the problem is, Harry, is that we're not going to see that early season development, which is the bit that we needed to see. We wouldn't be able to answer that question you've just said, Amy, until we saw that build up, that step by step early on. He certainly wasn't going to get on an Aprilia. Actually, that's not true. Quite often when you jump on a new factory bike, and again, I can speak from a bit of experience on this, you jump on a factory bike and you go, whoa, this thing works. And you can feel it straight away. You're sitting there and the bloody thing stops, goes and corners like you were expecting. And another time you get on a factory bike and you go, oh, for God's sake, what have I done? I'm going to have to work myself through a program of testing to get this thing anything like. And I had the feeling that Jorge Martin was going to get on that Aprilia and find it a bike that he could work with. But because of his injury, we're not going to see those early steps. So he's always going to be on the back foot moving forward. And testing.
But did he have no choice but to move really to Aprilia?
No, he had a choice. I think Jorge Martin had a choice, but he'd been messed around. I was going to use another word. He was messed around a little bit too much twice. at Ducati. So in the end, he said, I'll take the bloody decision out of your hands and I'll go and do my own thing. And bearing in mind that Aprilia made quite a big step. And if they make anything like a step this year, it would have been a good decision. He also will have seen to some extent what was going on at Ducati behind the scenes, which may have assisted him in making that decision as well. But I think I can understand Rivola and Aprilia's frustration because they're not going to see that combination of steps to be made to make their bike and their number one man, who obviously the whole thing revolves around to a great extent at Aprilia, making those moves forward. Very frustrating, and for all of us, because all of us want to see another motorbike challenging Ducati.
Mm. Well, it all begins this weekend. Thailand, round one. Who's taking the Grand Prix win on Sunday?
Well, I'm a winner already. I'm going to be there.
So you'll get the interview, yeah? Come on. I want a prediction, please. I want the Grand Prix winner. Not going to bother with the sprint. The Grand Prix
Marquez.
Winner.
Oh.
Which one?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not as daft as
Alex
it
went all
sound.
right. Alex went all right there in pre-season.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned Alex, has he? He's a bit of a dark horse. And bike development wise, they've not moved that far forward. And Alex has really come up. Do you know what? It used to be that Mark always used to say that Alex Marquez was a faster rider than he is, going back into the motocross time, flat track time, and all the rest of it. And Alex, he took his time in Moto 3, got it done. Took his time in Moto 2, got it done. And this now is his time again. I think Grassini, he knows really well. He's got the right bikes under him for this year. So Alex Marquez, for me, might emerge as the only threat that Mark's got. Who knows? That's going to be interesting.
Amy?
I was actually going to also go with Mark, but...
Well, you still can.
We'll allow it. We'll allow it. It's a cop-out, but we can allow it.
It's not a cop-out. He just beat me to it.
Sorry. What was that whole thing?
No, I'm going to go with Pecco.
Are you?
Okay.
Point to prove Pecco.
Are you doing sprint and a main race, or are you doing? Is that?
Well, I was going to avoid the sprint because that is really just an absolute lottery. Who knows what's going to happen down into turn one? So I'll probably go for Marc Marquez as well.
Talking of cop outs,
I mean, who else? If you couldn't have Marquez or Bagnaia.
Oh, okay. I was going to say we have to put Pecco in there.
Yeah, who outside of those two? Who's the other name to watch?
Well, it's Alex again, isn't it? And you mentioned Alex Marquez.
Yeah.
I mean, it is Alex Marquez. He's right there, performance-wise. I think he's there. He's on the same
Morbidelli?
team.
He looked decent in testing.
Maybe not winning, though.
No. But he looked better than he has done in a while.
Yeah.
I would say.
He's working with... is he working with Matteo Flamini now?
I don't know. I haven't looked up Guru Chiefs.
I've got a feeling he's now working with Matteo Flamini, who used to be Rossi's data engineer. I'm wondering how much of a bit of a going home back in the VR46 camp with, the guys will do to kind of get him a little bit back on track. He was definitely heading in the right direction at the back end of last year anyway. So perhaps a bit more to come from Morbidelli this year.
You've also got to consider that the weather in Thailand is a bit odd. It can be quite difficult.
Very true.
This time of year, we're just on the change now. When we get into March, it's just when you start getting a bit more rain and a little bit more difficulty. I mean, down in Samui, I think Samui are all on floods at the moment. Koh Samui down on the island. They have a slightly different weather system in Samui to the rest of it. When it's chucking it down with rain in Samui, it's nice everywhere else. And then it swaps around. Now, Buriram being in the centre of the country of Isan, it's quite it can be boiling hot, hugely humid, or absolutely slinging it down with rain. So we haven't really factored in the weather thing just yet. I think that's why they were all keen to do the test. I mean, the test means that you've actually had dry running, so you've got a default, you've got a baseline to be working from, because it could be interfered with weather-wise.
Well, look, I think we're set up for a tasty season nonetheless, and it does all kick off this weekend. We are hoping to be back regularly. We're still working on it. We just thought we'd better pop in for the start of the year to let you know that we're still alive and we're still here. So, but we are trying our best to make sure we can bring you regular and good quality content throughout the season. So thank you for your patience. Thank you, Mr. Huewen. Thank you, Miss Reynolds. And we'll see you hopefully soon. Let us know who you think is going to win Sunday's Grand Prix. And you can follow us on all the social media. Keith is going to be out there doing some videos and sit downs and stuff. So we'll make sure we get them up in good time for you as well. And until then, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.